You know, we live in a world today, and it really is depressing to think about it. We live in a world today where there are several 100 million people starving to death. They're starving to death right now. We live in a world where my guess is that between all the superpowers and the other nations of the world, close to $1 trillion are being spent every single year on weapons, on more and more nuclear bombs, on the most sophisticated nerve gases which can wipe people out and paralyze them. And yet, with all the brilliance and all the fine technology and all the robots and the great medical research that they do up there in the hospital and all the other hospitals, civilization hasn't advanced one bloody iota for the last thousands of years. I think all over this country today, there is a certain demoralization. And the demoralization is that some people believe that what goes on in the White House and what goes on in the Congress reflects the will of the American people. And by assembling here today, as the Rainbow Coalition and its other groups from 46 states in America, what we are saying very loud and clear is that Ronald Reagan and his billionaire friends do not represent America, but we do. Working class kids who once had the dream that all Americans have, that if you do your homework and you do what you're supposed to do, maybe you'll go to college. That dream is gone. It's horrible. In some of the largest cities in America, 50% of the kids are not graduating high school. The cost of college education in this country is zooming up, so you have to be a wealthy person to send your kid to college. There was once a dream that my parents had and many people's parents had, that if you work hard and you go to school, you can get a college education. But what people like this gentleman do not know is, for example, that in Scandinavia, in Sweden, you've had socialist governments for decades, that in fact that country is probably in most respects more democratic than the United States. They have 80 or 90% of the people voting. They have strong labor unions. They have a more open media. They have a healthcare system guaranteeing healthcare to all of the people. Not to say that that's utopia, but to say in Canada, north of us, you have two provinces which have been governed by socialist-type governments. So to equate socialism with communism is simply ignorance, and I'm afraid that too much of that ignorance exists in our own country.
More and more of my patients just can't afford to pay for health care, and I'm sure a lot of you are afraid that if someone in your family gets sick, you won't be able to pay the bill. This year, I'm voting for Bernie Sanders because he'll fight for a national health care system that works for everyone.
Bernie Sanders, it's time for change, real change.
But at a time when the wealthiest people of this country have seen a tremendous increase in their income, while at the same time the standard of living of working people and poor people has declined, I will be damned if I will vote for a proposal which will stick it to the middle class and the working people. How do we get to the root causes of crime? How do we stop crime, which is in fact a very, very serious problem in this country? And Mr. Speaker, I've got a problem. I've got a problem with a president and a Congress which allows 5 million children to go hungry, 2 million people to sleep out on the streets, cities to become breeding grounds for drugs and violence. And they say, we're getting tough on crime. If you want to get tough on crime, let's deal with the causes of crime. Let's demand that every man, woman, and child in this country have a decent opportunity and a decent standard of living. Let's not keep putting poor people into jail and disproportionately punishing blacks. While our children go hungry and sleep out on the streets, lack adequate health care or educational opportunity, the wealthiest people in this country have grown far richer while their tax burden has declined. The children suffer while the wealthy and the super rich ride about in their fancy limousines going out to the golf courses to spend their time. It is no secret that the President of the United States and the United States Congress do not represent the needs of ordinary Americans. And one of the major reasons for that is that we have an approach to campaign financing which, to a very large degree, allows wealthy people and major corporations to buy and sell politicians. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and ordinary Americans are shut out of the political system. The American people know that this institution, by and large, doesn't have the guts to stand up and do the right thing. The United States today is one of 2 nations in the industrialized world that does not have a national health care system. That has to do with campaign finance reform. The United States today, the chief executive officers are seeing their salaries soar, and the gap between the rich and the poor grows wider. 10 million Americans are unemployed. That has to do with campaign finance reform. The system, by and large, is owned and controlled by big money interests, and the President of the United States and much of the Congress does the work of protecting the big corporations and the wealthy people who control the economic and political life of this nation. And what this whole debate is about is finally saying, let us limit the amount of money that can be spent on elections. Let us have a level playing field. That's what the debate is about. First point that I want to talk about that concerns me very much is my fear that this country, this great country, this democracy, is evolving into an oligarchy. And an oligarchy is a country in which a few people have tremendous wealth and tremendous power and exercise that wealth and that power over all of the people. Because all over this country, the American people are outraged by the misplaced priorities that we have seen in Washington over the last decade. We have seen a situation where we give huge tax breaks to the wealthy, and you have 2 million people sleeping out on the street. Billions of dollars into all kinds of obsolete weapon systems, and you have 5 million children who are hungry. We have all seen the dramatic press conferences on the need for a line-item veto, for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution, and for other magical formulas for dealing with the deficit crisis. Well, today we're not dealing with magical formulae, we're dealing with concrete reality. It is time, frankly, to put up or to shut up. Let us give hope to people in America today who have lost hope. Let us provide jobs for the jobless, housing for the homeless, food for the hungry. Workers in the United States today are working longer hours, significantly longer hours, taking less vacation time than they used to take. And is there any wonder why so many millions of Americans feel stressed out? They need to work longer hours, they need to work overtime in order to compensate for the real decline in their wages. How can we spend hour after hour debating a $5 million appropriation, but not have any debate, not have any votes, when we are talking about putting at risk $20 billion of taxpayer money? All that I'm saying is that if you're going to tell low-income senior citizens in the state of Vermont, where the weather gets 30 below zero, that we can't help them pay their fuel bills, I think you have a deep moral obligation to make sure that not 1 cent of taxpayers' money goes to subsidize wealthy corporations who can take care of their own needs. When we talk about welfare, let's talk about welfare for the rich and the powerful. Now, we start off from a proposition that the wealthiest 1% of the population in this country owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. So if we're going to talk, I guess it's not interesting, Mr. Chairman. When we talk about the growth of the economy, what we should ask ourselves is who is gaining that income. And what is clearly going on is the lion's share, the overwhelming amount of the growth in income is going to the very, very wealthiest people, while the vast majority of the people are seeing a decline in their real incomes. This is what the reality is going to be. An individual is going to be in a downtown someplace, and that person needs $20 or $30. And that person is going to put their card in an ATM machine. And what they're going to find out at some point is that they're being charged $2 or $3 or maybe more to get $20 of their own money out of a bank. And frankly, Madam Chair, that is an outrage, that is a consumer ripoff, and it is our job as representatives of the American people to stop those ripoffs. Your thesis is, as is usually the thesis that we hear from representatives of big business, is that we got to prop up the wealthy and the powerful, because in the long run,
No.
Let me finish. In the long run, it's going to really help everybody.
No,
and the
that's not
fact
my
that the
thesis.
rich today, the richest 1%, owns more wealth than the bottom 90%, the fact that the CEOs make 200 times more than their workers, in some magical way, it's all going to come down. One of the issues that we don't talk about, and in fact, it's amazing how little we do talk about in the Congress, but has always amazed me, is that with all of the booming economy and all of the new technology, it turns out that American workers are working many longer hours than they did 15 and 20 years ago. I find it ironic that it is the taxpayers of this country who are going to have to bail out banks that have made billions and billions of dollars investing in Asia, huge profits. I don't know how we keep talking about a booming economy if only the people on the top are doing quite so well. We don't want to create a climate where some 13-year-old girl is not thinking about an issue because her mom said that she may get into trouble if she reads that book. Is it morally right that CEOs of large corporations now make over 500 times what their workers make and seem to make more money to the degree that they lay off American workers? The question, Mr. Speaker, is not whether we like Saddam Hussein or not. The question is whether he represents an imminent threat to the American people and whether a unilateral American invasion of Iraq will do more harm than good. And I must tell you that your testimony today only confirms all of my suspicions, and I urge you, and I mean this seriously, because you're an honest person. I think you just don't know what's going on in the real world. And I would urge you, come with me to Vermont, meet real people. The country clubs and the cocktail parties are not real America. The millionaires and billionaires are the exception to the rule. Walmart has replaced General Motors as the major employer in America, paying people starvation wages rather than living wages, and all of that does not matter to you. Doesn't matter. You didn't answer my question. Do you agree with the president? Do you agree with the president that it's a good idea that we lose good-paying jobs?
Governor Castle.
Can he answer the question?
Thank you. Time.
Every member of this body is pledged to do everything that he or she can to protect the American people from the horrendous scourge of terrorism. We believe that we can fight terrorism, protect the American people without undermining the basic constitutional rights which make us a free country. Let all of us remember that in the 1940s, innocent Japanese Americans, without any pretext, were herded into internment camps. In the 1960s, a president of the United States had a file on him, President Kennedy, by the FBI. In the 1960s, Martin Luther King Jr., who some of us consider to be one of the great heroes of the 20th century, was hounded and investigated by the FBI.
The small family farmer is the backbone of the community.
From coast to coast, people know about the plight of the family farm.
That's what I'm here to do, is support Bernie Sanders and everything that he has done and will do for America, Vermont, the small family farmer. Keep Bernie in there. It's going to be better.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message. And Mr. Gates, let me add my voice to those of the other senators here in applauding you, not just for the huge amount of money that you have provided all kinds of groups, but the innovative quality of your foundation that you and your wife had, and not just in the United States, but all over the world. You've done an extraordinary job, and I applaud you. They understand that our trade policies are failing when they note that our trade deficit is huge and growing larger every single year. And it seems to me, Madam President, that before we go forward again in pursuit of a failing trade agenda, we might want to sit back, take a moratorium, understand why our trade policies are failing, and then put together trade agreements that work for the working people and the middle class of this country rather than just the CEOs of large multinational corporations. The big oil companies, and I know that we're not supposed to talk about this too much in the United States Senate, but anyone who doesn't believe that these oil companies have huge political influence over what goes on here in Washington are surely kidding themselves. The wealthiest 1/10 of 1%, 0.1%, 300,000 men, women, and children now earn more income than do the bottom 150 million Americans. What we are dealing with right now is a ruling class in this country who in many ways act like alcoholics and drug addicts. They cannot get enough. No matter how many children live in poverty, no matter how high the unemployment numbers are, they want more and more and more. And I say enough is enough. The American people are angry. They are angry because they are living through the worst recession since the Great Depression. And you want to know why the American people are cynical about what goes on in Washington? You want to know why the Congress of the United States has an extremely low level of support or favorability? It is because the American people know they are getting ripped off. You got millions of people today who are working longer hours and their income is going down. Their wages are going down. Maybe they're paying more for health care. Their pensions are going down. There is something profoundly wrong when the top 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. Now, in the real world, what does that mean? It means that billionaires, people who are worth $20 billion, in the case of the Koch brothers, $80 billion, if we moved in that direction and ended all limitations on campaign spending, they could sit in a room, and Madam President, you come from a state of Wisconsin, a moderate-sized state, they could write a check out for $50 million or $100 million, and it would not matter at all.
And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob.
This grotesque level of inequality is immoral, it is bad economics, it is unsustainable. This type of rigged economy is not what America is supposed to be about. This has got to change. And as your president, together, we are going to change it. The problems we faced did not come down from the heavens. They are made by bad human decisions. And good human decisions can change them. Despair, one of the problems that we have got to deal with right now, and I think Jim was referring to this, is all over this country. You got a lot of bright, decent, good people, and they're saying, you know what? Situation is hopeless. You can't beat the Koch brothers, you can't beat the billionaires, you can't win, I'm giving up. That is exactly what they want us to believe. And I beg of you, do not enter that world of despair.